Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really going to dig into a foundational story, aren't we? The very beginning of the book of Exodus.
That's right. We're looking at those early chapters, the Israelites' situation in Egypt, how their numbers grew, and of course the arrival of Moses.
Yeah, these are, incredibly influential texts. Our goal is to pull out the main narrative threads, try to understand what motivated the people involved, and, well, get a feel for the tensions brewing.
Exactly. These aren't just dusty old verses. They set up massive themes: identity, power, fear, resistance. It all starts here. This context is crucial for everything that follows.
Okay, so let's start at the start. How did the Israelites get to Egypt in such numbers in the first place? The text mentions Jacob's family migrating. 70 people initially?
Yeah, 70 souls. A pretty small group, really, tying back to the Joseph story in Genesis. He brought his family there for refuge during a famine.
Right.
But Exodus jumps forward quite a bit. Joseph and that whole generation, they're gone. That memory has faded.
And that fading memory seems key, because after that, things change dramatically. Verse 7 says, the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them.
It's a powerful image, not just surviving, but thriving, expanding rapidly.
What would that kind of growth mean, practically speaking, back then?
Well, think about it. A huge population boom like that, it would definitely have social economic ripples for Egypt. It suggests, high birth rates, maybe others joining their community.
And from the Egyptian side, that could look worrying, a big shift in demographics.
Absolutely. It could easily be seen as a potential upset to the power balance.
Which leads us right to this new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. That phrase feels really significant.
It absolutely is. Whatever positive relationship existed because of Joseph, well, it's gone. This new ruler has no connection, no debt of gratitude.
That's like historical amnesia, almost.
Precisely. So the Israelites are now just this large group, viewed purely through the lens of present circumstances and potential threat, without that historical context.
And this new king is definitely alarmed.
Yeah.
He actually says to his people, "Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we." That's pretty blunt. Fear.
Well, it's fear, plain and simple. And beyond just the numbers, what might be fueling that?
Good question. Maybe worries about internal stability, a distinct group within the nation.
Could be.
Yeah.
Or economic competition,
Yeah.
resources, labor. And the text mentions the strategic fear, too. What if they side with enemies in a war?
Right. That's explicitly mentioned. Fear
Yeah.
often comes from a mix of things, doesn't it?
It does. And his solution, he says, let's deal wisely with them. But that wisdom, it turns dark quickly.
Yeah, wisely here means oppression, forced labor. They set taskmasters over them to afflict them with their burdens.
And we even get specific names for the building projects, the treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. It makes it feel very concrete, very real.
It does ground it. So this is a clear shift from maybe tolerated guests to outright subjugated labor, a tool for control.
And a way to exploit their numbers for Egypt's benefit, building these massive projects.
But then there's that twist. The text says, but the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. It backfired.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How does that happen?
Well, what are the possibilities? Does hardship sometimes strengthen resolve? Make a community cling tighter to its identity?
That's one interpretation. Sometimes external pressure does forge stronger bonds. Maybe bigger families felt like a form of strength or resource, especially if labor was needed. It's complex. Oppression doesn't always crush. Sometimes it fuels resilience.
Like a pressure cooker, maybe. The Egyptians get grieved, the text says. Their plan fails, making them maybe even more anxious.
Likely, yes, which probably leads to even harsher conditions. Their lives become bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. It sounds absolutely brutal.
Just relentless, grinding hardship. And it's in that context that we see the first real act of defiance from an unexpected place.
Yes, the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah.
The king's fear escalates dramatically. He orders them to kill all the baby boys born to the Hebrews, let the girls live, kill the boys.
It's genocide, essentially. A horrific attempt at demographic control targeting the future itself.
Chilling. But these two women, they refuse. The text says they feared God more than the king.
That's the core of it. Their loyalty is to a higher authority, a moral compass that overrides the earthly king's command. It really makes you think, doesn't it, about obedience and conscience.
It really does. And when Pharaoh calls them on it, asks why the boys are still alive, their explanation is, well, It's quite clever.
Very clever. They basically say, oh, the Hebrew women are just too quick. They give birth before we can even get there.
It's brilliant, really. It shifts the blame, protects themselves, and, crucially, saves the children.
It shows resistance isn't always a head-on confrontation. Sometimes it's about wit, knowing how to work the system, or rather, work around it. Subtle defiance.
And it seems to work, for a time. The text says God dealt well with the midwives. They were blessed, maybe got status. He made them houses, and the people kept multiplying.
Yes, their courage seems to have been rewarded both divinely and maybe within their own community. Making them houses could mean establishing their families, giving them security.
But Pharaoh doesn't give up. His plan failed, so he doubles down. He issues a decree to all his people.
A much wider command now.
Yeah. Throw every newborn Hebrew son into the river, every single one. Only let the daughters live. This makes everyone complicit.
It's a terrible escalation. The river, usually a source of life for Egypt, becomes this symbol of death for the Israelites. And it's right into this darkness that the story of Moses begins.
We meet his parents, both from the tribe of Levi, and when his mother sees him, the text just says she saw he was a goodly child. Simple words, but loaded with meaning in this context.
You have to imagine, in that situation, seeing your newborn son goodly must mean more than just, cute. It suggests something special, maybe a flicker of hope, a reason to take an enormous risk.
And she does. She hides him for 3 months. But you can't hide a baby forever.
No. So she comes up with this incredible plan, the Ark of Bulrushes.
She weaves this little basket, makes it waterproof with bitumen, and pitch practical details there, puts the baby inside.
And places it among the reeds by the edge of the Nile, the very river decreed to be his death sentence.
It's an act of sheer desperation, but also somehow hope. Trusting him to the water, but hoping for discovery. And his sister is there, watching.
That detail is crucial. The sister watching from afar, ready to act. It's not just leaving him to fate. There's a plan, however fragile.
And then the turning point. Pharaoh's daughter comes down to the river to bathe.
Just happens to be there. Or perhaps it was a regular spot.
She sees the basket, hears the baby crying. And the text says she has compassion. She knows immediately this is one of the Hebrews' children.
Think about that. She's the daughter of the man who ordered this. But her immediate reaction is empathy. It shows that even within the oppressor system, individuals can act differently.
Humanity can break through. It's not monolithic.
Exactly.
And then Moses' sister, who's been watching, sees her chance. So clever, she runs up and asks, "Should I go find a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby for you?"
Brilliant move. Plays right into the princess's need, but with a hidden agenda.
And Pharaoh's daughter says yes. So the sister goes and gets
The baby's own mother.
It's incredible. The mother gets hired, gets paid wages to nurse her own son, whom she saved from death, all under the protection of the princess.
The irony is just layers deep. Survival, resourcefulness, manipulating the system from within. It's quite something.
So eventually the child grows, he's weaned, and his mother brings him back to Pharaoh's daughter. He becomes her adopted son.
And she names him Moses. Because, she says, I drew him out of the water. His name itself is a reminder of his rescue, his origins.
Given by his Egyptian mother, but a name that will become synonymous with Hebrew liberation.
Exactly.
Okay, so years pass. Moses grows up in the palace, a prince of Egypt, essentially. But he doesn't forget, or maybe he learns about, his roots.
Right. The text says when he was grown, he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. He sees the reality of their enslavement.
What do you think prompts that? He had a privileged life. Why connect with the suffering?
Maybe it's an innate sense of identity. Maybe his mother instilled something during those early years. Maybe it's just basic human empathy, seeing injustice. He's clearly conflicted, torn between two worlds.
And that conflict boils over. He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren.
And he snaps. He looks around, sees no one watching or thinks no one is.
Kills the Egyptian.
Yeah.
Buries him in the sand. It's impulsive. It's violent. A huge turning point.
It shows his solidarity, his anger at the injustice, but also his maybe naivety or his struggle with how to actually deal with this, resorting to hidden violence.
And the secrecy immediately unravels. The very next day, he tries to break up a fight between two Hebrews.
And one of them throws it right back in his face. Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?
Oof, so much for secrecy. How must Moses have felt hearing that? From his own people.
Shocked, probably. And scared. It shows they don't trust him yet. They see him as an outsider, maybe dangerous. His act didn't win them over. It made them wary.
Yeah, the text says Moses feared and said, "Surely this thing is known," and his fear is justified. Pharaoh finds out.
And Pharaoh wants him dead. The privilege is gone. The protection is gone.
So Moses has to run. He flees Egypt altogether, ends up in the land of Midian by a well. End of chapter 1 of his life, really.
Totally. From palace prince to fugitive exile. A drastic change, forced by his own actions and the consequences. This journey into the wilderness is going to shape him.
And in Midian, his character shows through again, doesn't it? He helps these 7 women, daughters of the local priest, rule well.
Yeah, some shepherds are hassling them at the well, trying to drive them off. Moses steps in, defends them, waters their flock for them.
Just an act of kindness to strangers.
But it leads to everything. They go home, tell their father about this Egyptian who helped them.
Interesting, they call him an Egyptian. That's how he must have looked or seemed.
Right. And Rule says, well, where is he? Go invite him for a meal. Basic hospitality.
And Moses agrees. He ends up staying, finds a measure of peace there, it seems. The text says he was content to dwell with Rule.
Finds a new community, a refuge, and eventually a family. Rule gives him his daughter, Zipporah, in marriage.
They have a son, and the name Moses gives him is so telling. Gershom.
Meaning.
For he said, "I have been a stranger in a strange land."
Even with a new family, that sense of exile, of being disconnected from his origins, is right there.
It really encapsulates his journey so far. He's found a place, but he knows it's not truly his place. He's still marked by being an outsider. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, things haven't gotten better for the Israelites. The king dies, presumably the one Moses fled from, but the oppression continues under the next ruler.
Right, the core problem, the system of bondage, hasn't changed, and the suffering continues. The text says they sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried.
This deep collective cry goes up. It came up unto God. It feels like a breaking point.
It underscores the sheer weight of their suffering generation after generation now. It's not just hardship, it's despair reaching a critical mass.
In the final verses of this section, chapter 2, they feel like a shift. It says, God heard their groaning.
Yes, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. That connection to past promises is invoked.
And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. It sounds like attention is finally being paid. The stage is set.
It really is. So we've covered a lot, this incredible population growth, the fear it sparks, leading to brutal oppression, then acts of courage, like the midwives.
Right, and the almost unbelievable story of Moses' birth and rescue. His life split between 2 worlds, his impulsive act, his flight.
And then this period in Midian, finding refuge, but still a stranger, all while his people suffering deepens until their cry finally, pierces the heavens, so to speak.
And the themes are just so powerful, aren't they? Resilience against all odds, the danger of fear driving policy, how individual acts of defiance can ripple outwards.
Absolutely. And the seeds of a liberation story being sown in the midst of terrible darkness.
Which leads us to something for you, the listener, to think about.
Mm.
We see this cycle here: power, fear of the other, oppression. How do echoes of that play out today when societies face demographic shifts or perceived threats?
Yeah, and what's the role of individual conscience when you're faced with something you know is wrong, especially if it's systemic? And maybe most importantly, what does it really mean for a community's cry, their deep suffering, to be truly heard and acknowledged? Something to ponder.